This story is nowhere near as harrowing as some that I have read here, but when I found this subreddit, I knew I wanted to share this experience here. 3 years ago, I tried Tinder for the first time. I was 25 at the time, and while most 25-year-old women have dabbled on Tinder or the like, I hadn't been single since I was 17. I met my ex while I was in high school. 6 years later, we got married, had a baby. I was happy. But those last couple of years together, he had really begun to resent me and the family we had created together. I fought to keep our relationship together, but the abuse became more frequent and more intense. It got to the point where I took our baby and fled to the house in the middle of the night. My mind was scarred, and my heart was raw. It was a really difficult time in my life. A couple of months after I left, I had a new home, a new job, and a renewed sense of life. I was starting to open up and could feel myself healing. I was, however, lonely. I was adjusting to shared custody and spent my weekends alone. I didn't want to jump into another relationship, but I did want to experience some of the things my 8-year relationship hadn't allowed me. Joining Tinder felt fun. It was new and scary, and after so much trauma, it felt nice to have so much positive attention. My self-worth was low, so the cheap compliments and instant gratification of the app felt incredible. Who am I to deserve their attention? Why would they choose to speak to me of all women? Not my healthiest coping mechanism, but I wanted to feel desirable. That's when I met Derek. Derek was an unassuming, average guy. He was cute enough, but not so attractive that I felt self-conscious. Derek and I shared a few interests: craft beer, hiking, and he had a sense of humor that I liked. We agreed to meet up at a local restaurant. I was so nervous. My first date in 8 years. I donned my cutest dress, got made up, and headed out. As I waited in the restaurant, my palms were sweaty, my heart was fluttering, and I began to question myself. He arrived and everything was awkward at first. We ordered our first beers and started to break the ice. As soon as the buzz of the alcohol began to hit, our conversation took off. We had relaxed in each other's company, and the rest of the date went smoothly. We joked about karaoke across town. He laughed about how he didn't like karaoke. I am a huge fan of karaoke. Well, no superstar. I have spent a good amount of time in choirs and can carry a tune well enough. One of my favorite rowdy weekend activities is going to the bar and busting out some songs with that sweet taste of gin on my tongue. I convinced him to go with me, and we left the restaurant. We sang into the night, taking shots, flirting, laughing. We ended the night in his truck, clumsily fumbling with each other's buttons and zippers, hearts racing with excitement. This had been what I needed. We texted back and forth more often, and soon we were talking about another date. I'd enjoyed our time together, and liked that I didn't feel a deep connection with him. It was fun, and that was it. Because my heart wasn't tangled up in feelings, he felt safe. We decided for our second date that we would go tubing down a river that runs through our town. We had parked his orange truck at the end of the tubing run and took the tubes in my truck upriver. We agreed that he would zip my truck key into his pocket on his shorts, and that he would drop me off at my truck afterwards. Bright summer heat warmed our skin, and the water felt crisp and fresh on our toes. The afternoon slipped past as we floated down the river. When we reached the bottom, we deflated our tubes and headed back to my truck. Only, when Derek reached into his pocket, his face sank. He looked at me and said, "Your key is gone." I laughed. Surely he was joking. He insisted this wasn't a joke. Gravity pulled at my stomach, and I began to panic. This was the only copy of my truck key, and I had taken it on the river. I felt foolish and worried about how I wouldn't get a new key if we couldn't find it. The river was long. We had been tubing for hours. We'd stopped at several places to swim. He offered to drive me home, and I accepted. During the drive, we made a plan to meet up at the next day to search for my key at some of the stops we had made. We spent the next afternoon combing our swimming holes for my key. Up and down we swam, with very little hope that we would ever see my keys. We had to try, though, and we kept at it. From one spot to another, we drove, we swam, and we moved on. At the very last place we checked, as the light of afternoon faded into a hazy orange, something caught his eye. Underwater, near the shore, were my keys. We were elated, and could not believe our luck. To celebrate, we went back to his place for some drinks. He drove me down a long wooded driveway, and at the very end was a shaded trailer. He told me that he was only renting a room here from an elderly couple, but they were on vacation, so we would be alone. We walked over the creaking porch and entered the trailer. Inside, I could see the kitchen was messy. Not just a couple of dishes, but every surface was covered with mess. He ushered me away to show me his room. It was small and not very clean either. Dirty clothes, mattress on the floor, a Rubbermaid bin with some snacks like Doritos, and cheap warm beer. We had slept together, the yellow light of the trailer extenuating the stains on the wall. Afterwards, the spark of fun I had felt when we first met had withered, and I felt gross. I decided that it would be our last date. A week passed, and we hardly texted. Our brief fling was ending, and I didn't expect to see him again. My mind moved on to other things. The coming weekend, my friends were coming to town, and I was excited. We made plans to go to karaoke together on Saturday night. When the day arrived, I was surprised to see a text from Derek on my phone. "Are you going to karaoke tonight?" it read. I responded that I was, and he texted back that he would be there. I thought, you didn't even like karaoke? And I asked him that. And he said that he had been invited by a girl he worked with and thought he should give me a heads up that he would be with a date, in case I was there. I thanked him for taking the time to let me know. I reassured him that I wouldn't be bothered at all, and said that I hoped that he had a great date. Around 9:30 that night, my friends and I arrived at the bar. The dim lights and reflective foil stars, an all too familiar scene. We got our drinks and picked a booth with a good view of the stage. I had a strange sensation, like someone was watching me. I turned my head, scanning the bar, and our eyes locked. Derek and his date were a few booths away, and he was watching us. He waved zealously with a big smile. His date turned around to look, and I managed an awkward wave. I was absolutely fine with him being there on a date, but I didn't want to advertise that we knew each other or make his date uncomfortable. My friends were all aware of the time we had spent together, my thoughts on the experience, and the text he had sent me earlier. We were all thinking it was a bit odd that he would go out of his way to interact with me in front of his date, but no harm, no foul. He was just being friendly. The evening carried on, and we all had a great time, basking in the atmosphere, drinking in the songs and laughter. A couple of hours in, though, we were sitting in our booth when Derek stumbled over to our table with his date. He introduced her as Kate and plopped down beside me, pulling her down into our booth next to him. The strong smell of alcohol oozed off them, and I could see that they were hammered. It became obvious they had way too much to drink, their eyes glazed and words slurred. Kate seemed really nice, despite her state, and she launched into a drunk story to the whole table. My friends and I were fairly uncomfortable, and were unsure what was going on. Under the table, I felt Derek's sticky hand slide into my thigh. His date was right there, and I was stunned. Without making a scene, I suddenly removed his hand and excused myself to get another drink. As I walked across the room, I could feel his eyes raking my back, and sure enough, when I turned around, he was watching. When I got back, Kate was slurring that her taxi had come. She and Derek exchanged a sloppy kiss and goodnights, and then it was just us and Derek. Derek's mood shifted after that. He was drunkenly unaware of how uncomfortable the table was, and we could tell he was brooding over his date having left without him. Derek turned his attention to me. He slung his heavy arm over my shoulder and leaned in, his sour breath managing to come together to form clumsy sentences. "You're so cute. I love your laugh." I was rigid and just wanted him to leave. When he got up to get another beer, my friends and I spoke about the situation, one of them remarking, "You know you can do better than this, right?" I said that yes, as casual as this had been, I had made a mistake. We came to the conclusion that it would be best if we ended the night early, as we didn't see him leaving me alone. As a backup plan, if anything went south, we agreed that the girls would go to the bathroom and leave out the back door, while our male friend would distract him and slip away. Derek arrived back at the table, sloshing his beer onto his front. He slurred, "Where are we going next?" I hesitated, but my friend told him that we would all be going home. Derek said he would walk us there, and we politely declined. He was leaning up against a wall and barely holding himself up at this point. We asked him how he was going to get home, and if we can call him a cab. Derek drunkenly pouted that he could just come to my place with me. Trying to shut him down as politely as I could, I told him that my child was there with a sitter, so I couldn't have him over. He didn't need to know that that wasn't true, though. He refused a taxi and said he would just sleep in his truck. Since his eyelids were drooping and looking at the rest of his state, it seemed reasonable that he would be able to fall asleep in a truck. We accepted that answer. As we started to leave, he stumbled after us. We stopped and reminded him that we were going to bed. He argued again that he should come with me. My friends and I locked eyes. It was time to engage with our backup plan. The two girls and I excused ourselves to the washroom, while our friends distracted him. Slipping out the back door, the cool rush of night air hit us, and we hurried to the path that led to their hotel. Our friend caught up with us, and said he had left Derek behind at the bar. We were all relieved to be out of there, and started the walk back to their hotel. One of the girls was sober, and offered to drive me home when we got to the hotel, and I accepted. A few minutes down the path, my phone began to ring. I looked at the caller ID and felt my stomach drop. It was Derek. I turned the volume down and let it ring. And to my surprise, he left a voicemail. I turned on the speaker and played it out loud. Derek's voice sounded confused as his words melted together into the phone. "Where are you guys? I thought we were gonna hang out. I don't understand." We were all glad he had left, and agreed that this had been wild. That's when the phone rang again. Another voicemail popped up on my screen. In the dim light of the trail, I played the new voicemail aloud once more. His drunken speech was more intense this time. As he launched into how he didn't understand why I had left, I had hurt his feelings, and he was in love with me. The tone of his voice shook me when I heard him say, "I love you." There was something dark and heavy about it, and left me feeling unsettled. We were all creeped out, but happy to see the bright sign of the hotel ahead. We traveled the carpeted hallway to their room, so my friend could grab her keys and take me home. As we entered the room, my phone began to ring again. This time, the voicemail sent shockwaves of fear through my body. Derek's voice had taken an edge, as he repeated that he loved me, but he was actually really effing mad at me for leaving him at the bar. He went on about how I could do that to him. He didn't know what he was going to do. His voice shook with anger as he stumbled over himself, expressing how I had betrayed him. The last thing he said before hanging up echoed into the hotel room. "You know, I'm really starting to hate you." The sky was unhinged and I was terrified. I was grateful the sight of Derek hadn't shown up when we were alone in his secluded trailer. My friends gave me a hug and told me to call them if I had needed anything and to keep them posted and updated. My friend took me home, and as I unlocked the door and stepped into the comfort of home, I felt exhausted. It had not been the night out I expected, and Derek's erratic behavior had really freaked me out. Fresh out of an abusive relationship, his actions at the bar, then the voicemails rang some all too familiar bells. That's when I saw the headlights. It was very late for anyone to be driving down my street. I peeked through the curtain. My blood ran cold and I trembled. Sitting in the cab of his orange truck was Derek. Mind racing, I panicked. This dude could barely hold himself up when we left. He was blacked out, obliterated. How did he drive across town to my house? How did he find me? I immediately remembered the other week when he dropped me off after my key was lost. How could I have been so stupid? I barely knew him. We had only met 3 times. Derek's face was stony and etched with rage as he sat in the dark cab staring at my house. He wasn't getting out. He was just staring. While I was on my hands and knees peeking out the window, all the lights were off inside. I was sure he couldn't see me. Then the screen on my phone lit up. He was calling me again. I quickly hid it so he wouldn't see the light. Hand shaking, I played the voicemail as quietly as I could. Derek only said one thing this time, a phrase that sent terror shooting down my spine. In a drunken sing-song voice, almost taunting me, he quietly said, "Where are you?" Click. I was terrified. Somehow, I hadn't really considered I could be in danger, and chalked up all of the fear to my past experiences. Surely, I was overreacting, and it was my fault for reading too much into this. I shouldn't be this scared, and I don't want to make a scene. That last voicemail sealed the deal. I figured even if I was overreacting, at the very least he was a drunk driver. I called 911, and the dispatcher said someone would be there in a couple of minutes. As I peeked out the window, I saw him get out of his truck. He was done waiting. His heavy feet stumbled as they hit the pavement, and he looked around. Derek's voice cut through the night. He started yelling my name. The wild anger in his voice was tangible through the walls, and he just yelled into the street, "Where are you?" Derek started to stumble towards my house when the flashing red and blue lights cascaded down the street, lighting up his face and highlighting every ounce of rage carved into his features. 2 police cars pulled up, and the officers got out. I was still peeking out from inside my dark house and couldn't hear much of what was happening. I watched them breathalyze him, which he obviously failed. The officers inspected his truck. They all spoke for a while, and one of the officers came to my door. I spoke to him about what had happened, and he was very empathetic. He said as unsettling as his actions had been, there wasn't much they could do without a direct threat. The officer let me know that they would be taking him in for the night, and he would be charged with drunk driving. But he would be out tomorrow, and to make sure I kept my doors locked and stayed safe. The tow truck came to remove his orange truck from the road, and I could see him arguing. The officers weren't having any of it, and they turned him around to cuff him. As the handcuffs locked around his wrist, he yelled out one last time, looking directly at the window I was peeking out. "I know you're in there," saying my name. "Why don't you come out to say goodnight?" As quickly as my street had filled up, it was empty. The quiet shadows of late night swallowing the earlier chaos into nothingness. Derek texted me the next afternoon. "I'm very sorry about last night. I was in a bad place." I responded that his actions were unacceptable, and how dare he show up at the house my child lives at, and that I would prefer not to hear from him again. He apologized one last time, and I haven't heard from him since. Over the next few months, I would see him on a bike going to and from his workplace, so I know he lost his license. I was always weary that he would bump into me, which thankfully never happened. I can only imagine how much angrier he was after the night lost him his license. I found out that he moved to the mainland a while back, which was quite a relief for me, and I no longer feel as on edge around town. But Derek, let's never meet again. This all started my sophomore year of high school. I was 15 and at a new school, so I didn't have many friends yet. I was in that phase where I thought I needed a boyfriend to have validation, so I was actively trying to find a date for the homecoming dance. A classmate suggested a junior in one of our classes, whom I'll call David, to be my date and got him to ask me out. He seemed nice, so I said yes, a decision that would haunt me for the next 2 years. David and I had fun at homecoming, so when he asked me to be his girlfriend, I said yes. It's important to note that he was quite the loner. He was very much into science and often spent time alone conducting experiments in his room and even at school at times. I just brushed it off as him being quirky and figured I shouldn't get in the way of his passions, but it wasn't long before I realized there was much more to his nice guy facade. Over the first several weeks of our relationship, we would talk over the phone, and David would make increasingly inappropriate comments about things he wanted to do to me. I was 15 at the time, and he was 17, so not only was I incredibly uncomfortable, but he was also nearly an adult himself, making these comments to a younger girl. I kept telling him I wasn't comfortable with the things he was saying, but he always laughed it off as me being a prude. I was fed up after a while, and finally threatened to break up with him, and that finally made him stop. I should have recognized the red flags and bailed at that moment, but, again, I was dumb, and felt it wasn't worth anything unless I had a boyfriend. Although the inappropriate comments stopped for the time being, he would still become increasingly possessive and downright obsessed over what I was doing at all hours of the day. He would intrude on conversations I had with my friends and want to know things that frankly weren't any of his business. One day, when I was getting into the shower, he called and my dad told him I would call him when I was done. Instead of simply waiting like any rational person would do, he called a total of 4 times over the next 10 to 15 minutes to see if I was out of the shower yet. I began to feel suffocated, but every time I asked him to back off, he would cry about how depressed he was and that he only wanted to talk to someone to feel like he was wanted. I always fell for it like the dummy I was, but now I recognized the clear manipulation that it was. One day I finally had enough. I broke up with him in person at school, and he bawled like a child. I didn't let it get to me this time. However, I firmly told him that I didn't want to be his girlfriend anymore. Although he couldn't get his way, he still somehow convinced me to stay friends. I know, I was an idiot. But things didn't end there. Oh no, dear readers, we are only just beginning. Over the next several months, David kept trying to get me to go out with him again, even going as far as to cry in front of other people to garner sympathy. He even tried starting rumors about us sleeping together. We didn't. Fortunately for me, David had earned a bad reputation throughout his school career, so no one really believed him. He would even try to trick me into a date by subtly suggesting we go see a movie as friends, which I always got around by inviting my friends to come along too. They knew he was doing and never turned down the chance to help a girl out. In the last few weeks I spoke to him, he would sit on the phone for hours on and literally begging me to take him back. And thankfully, I held on strong and kept refusing. One night his brother actually called me, telling me he was crying hysterically. Eventually, it came to a point where I told him I didn't want to hang out anymore, because it was clear that he would not stop until I became his girlfriend again. He agreed to not approach me anymore, but I wouldn't be running the story if it ended there. The very next day at school, David came up to me like nothing had happened. I once again reminded him of the conversation we had the night before about how we agreed to not hang out anymore, but he acted offended that I would even suggest such a thing. Eventually, my friends and I convinced him to leave, but of course it didn't stop there. For 2 weeks straight, he would follow me around school, call my house and my cell phone. This was the days before smartphones, so blocking the number wasn't that easy. I tried to get help from the school staff, but the vice principal basically told me that there was nothing I could do because he wasn't trying to hurt me. I was frustrated, but thankfully David seemed to back off when it was clear I wasn't going to give in. That is, until I got another boyfriend. The following school year, my junior year, I started dating a senior named Justin. Not long after we went public with our relationship, I noticed David following me again. Now Justin was a football player, and he was a pretty big guy with unresolved anger issues, so he didn't take kindly to this guy. He would hang out with me and my friends, and David would hover around nearby, walking by every now and then, and making it blatantly obvious that he was spying on me. One day Justin walked straight up to David and confronted him. He didn't lay his hands on him or threaten him in any way, but he did ask, "What are you doing?" in a really angry tone. David simply muttered some kind of excuse and scurried away. We thought that was the end of it, but later in the day I was called to the principal's office. Turns out David claimed that Justin threatened him and blocked the doorway so he couldn't move. Justin denied it, of course, and told the principal I could back up his claim, which I did. Thankfully, nothing came of it, but this was only the first of a long line of incidents. Over the school year, David and his brother, who was a year younger than me, would try to get Justin in trouble every which way they could, even starting rumors and threatening his life. A classmate of mine overheard them talking about ambushing Justin and hurting him, but even though I brought this to the staff, nothing was done about it. All the while, David kept following me when Justin wasn't around. There wasn't even an incident in the school gym one day when a bunch of classes had to stay there for the period. He and I were both there, and he made sure to sit on the bleachers nearby, even following me when I moved. I was on the verge of tears, but then I saw two guys I knew sitting a few rows down from me. They were cool with me, so I got their attention and, after explaining what was going on, asked them if I could sit with them to just feel a little safer. They accepted, and we ended up having a good time talking about music and anime. In spite of this, things just kept getting worse with David. Finally, it came to a head when David's brother wrote a letter to Justin's sister. They had been good friends before this whole mess started, and in the letter, David's brother threatened physical harm to me and to Justin. The sister gave the letter to Justin, who then came to me, and we both brought it to the principal. That was when the principal called everyone involved into his office and had a nice little chat with us. The principal showed the letter to David's brother and said, "I can expel you for this right now, but I'm willing to let it go on one condition." David and Justin were both about to graduate, so the principal gave them the ultimatum. He stated that David and his brother were not to contact me or Justin in any way, shape, or form for the rest of the school year, or he would see to it that neither of them would graduate. I was angry, because Justin did nothing wrong. But in the end, we just wanted this whole mess to be over with. From that point on, David didn't bother me again, thankfully, but I'm still filled with anxiety to this day. He made me afraid for my life, or even to walk the halls of my school. Justin and I ended up breaking up that summer for unrelated reasons, and the following year I didn't have to see either of them ever again. A few years later, however, David tried to send me a friend request on Facebook. I had an immediate panic attack and not only deleted the request, but I blocked him as well. I even unfriended and blocked the two mutual friends we had for good measure. Sure, I was being paranoid, but it made me feel better. There was one last incident involving David, not with me, but with my younger brother. When he was 14, he took his then girlfriend to see one of the Transformers movies, and David walked in. Upon recognizing my brother, he sat behind him and his date and kept laughing uncontrollably at the inappropriate times, and even started kicking their seat. My brother tried confronting him, but it did no good. They didn't bother getting the manager, because my brother's date was too afraid he would attack them if they tried to leave. Thankfully, that was the last incident I or anyone close to me ever had with him. I'm doing much better now. I'm 30 years old, and ironically, I ended up marrying one of the guys who sat with me in the gym that day. My advice to any teenagers reading this is that you should always pay attention to red flags and get rid of toxic people in your life. It's always better to end up alone than stuck with someone who makes you feel bad and treats you like your feelings don't matter. Well, as for David, let's not meet again. I'm a little out of this while I write this, so sorry for any mistakes. For some context, this took place in June 2018, about 2 weeks before I turned 18. I'm female. I had just finished my A levels and decided to join Tinder for a joke, just to have a bit of fun and waste time. I thought it would be fun to put my Snapchat in my bio, just to see how many people added me, and I admit I enjoyed the attention from guys. People added me, but no one actually messaged me except for one guy. I'll keep his name anonymous. This guy was 20, I was 17 at the time, and was about an hour drive away from me. This is important later. We started off just innocently chatting. The conversation was dry, but it killed boredom, so I held the conversation. One day he randomly popped up asking, "So when are we gonna meet then?" I was hesitant at first, but I agreed in the end after I ran it over with my parents. I invited him over to my house. I don't know what I was thinking, but I told him he can come over. He got there the next day at 9 a.m. Bearing in mind he lived an hour away from me, first red flag. I was confused as heck, but I wasn't even dressed for the day. Nevertheless, I invited him in and finished getting ready. We just chilled and watched films all day before heading off out around 2 p.m. We chilled by the beach for a bit before coming back to my house at about 5 p.m. I was expecting him to go home after that, but no, he stayed. We watched a couple more films, and every now and then I would look over to him and catch him flat out staring at me. We would lock eyes, and he would say something creepy like, "I love your eyes," or "I'm so glad I've met you," all while knowing me for all of 8 hours. I regret to say we ended up kissing. A lot, actually, but I felt awkward, and being a naive 17-year-old on our first real date, I thought that was what you're supposed to do. He left around 10 p.m. He was at my house for 13 hours, but there was no sparks at the end. I was expecting there to be that one thing. But nope. He turned up at 9 a.m. again, like 2 days later. I went along with it because I had nothing better to do. He didn't leave again until about 9 p.m. At this point, I had no interest in seeing him again, and I didn't really feel a romantic connection with him. I'll admit, I may have led him on as I never actually told him I wasn't interested. Looking back now, I should have told him, and maybe the next events wouldn't have happened at all. My birthday rolls around, the day before, and he shows up at 9 a.m. again, and he takes me out. We go to the mall, and he buys me so much, and I've known him for only 3 days. I kept saying, "No, you don't have to," and "let me buy this," but he insisted because it was my birthday. I'd only met this guy twice before and known him all of 5 minutes, and he was buying me so much stuff, like clothes, makeups, and special underwear. I was still only 17, even though my birthday was the next day. I felt like I was being treated like a prostitute, and every time we walked around, he would force my hand into his or try and kiss me. I felt so awkward. Anyway, we get back to my house around 6 p.m. I come home to flowers from him that he had delivered to my house. We chill in my room. I didn't know what to do. I felt trapped. I felt like I couldn't tell him to leave because he had just spent so much money on me. Anyways, he tried to sleep with me. He kept saying, "Come on, didn't you have a nice birthday? And I came all this way for you." Just creepy stuff like that, trying to get me to sleep with him. I just kissed him and told him I didn't want to. I wasn't a virgin, but I definitely didn't want to sleep with him. He finally leaves and he just breaks down crying. I don't know why. I just felt so trapped. I try and be cold with him over messages and stuff for the next few days, hoping to scare him off. Nope. About 3 days after my birthday, I get home from work at about 9:30 p.m. Guess whose car I see parked outside my house? I walk in, and he's just chatting to my family in the lounge. They seem to really like him, even though I told them how creepy he was being. We ended up going to a local pub and getting drinks. We get back to my house, and I'm pretty drunk at this point. He ordered me all the spirits pretty much, even though I hadn't even asked him to buy me a drink. So I suggest more drinks and crack open a bottle of bubbly. I had saved it for my birthday. And as we're drinking more, he gets quieter. I look up at him and ask him what's wrong. And he suddenly grabs me, kisses me, and tries to put his hand up my skirt. I immediately push him off and stare angrily at him. He then looks at me with a really sinister look and says, "I deserve it." Because he had alcohol, he couldn't drive home, so he had to stay over. I tell him I'm too drunk and I want to go to bed. Luckily, my mother happily showed him to the guest bedroom, and I didn't see him again until morning. I woke up at around 9 and walked downstairs to find him cuddling my cat in the garden, and I wanted to say, "Get away from her, you creep." I tell him I had a call from work saying that I think they need me in an hour and that he needs to leave. He tried to protest, saying that he'll wait till I'm finished and we can hang out, but I tell him no, that I'm seeing a friend later, which wasn't a lie, but the work lie made him leave quicker. And yet he still protests, saying we can all hang out together. Eventually he takes no for an answer and leaves. I cry and cry, and tell my mom everything. She still likes to tell me that he wasn't that bad to this day, but she didn't have to deal with him like I did. I meet my friend and tell her all about him, and that I'm going to leave it a couple days and tell him I don't want to see him anymore. However, that same night, I get a lengthy paragraph from this guy, professing his undying love to me. Some of the most memorable quotes from this are, "You are my whole world, I'd be nothing without you," and "I'm so glad I've met you, I can't wait to share a life together." That was it. I had to be straight up with him. I told him everything, that I didn't feel a connection to him, and that he did to me when he was drunk was not okay. I even offered to return the things he bought me, but he said no. Surprisingly, he actually apologized and said he was sorry for making me feel uncomfortable. Brilliant, that's what I thought. No. He started stalking me. Anyone who's got Snapchat will know that you can view a map that tells you where all your friends are. You can turn it off so people can't see you, but I customized mine so that only people I'm close with can see where I am. He was one of them. I forgot to turn it off. And whenever I went out, he was there about an hour later. Remember, he lives about an hour from me. And I first noticed he had followed me after I went to the beach, the same one I had went with him. And I went with my friends. About 2 or 3 hours into our day, we were getting ready to go home. I opened up my Snap Maps, as I always do, just so I could see that me and my friend were together and show her. It's a silly thing I do, but I find it cute seeing our little Bitmoji characters on the map. When I saw him, and he who shall not be named was with us, his little Bitmoji character, probably like 200 yards away from us, seen just now. My eyes widened. I told my friend that the guy I had been complaining about all day was literally here now with us somewhere. We both panicked and sped walked to my car and drove home. It happened 2 more times. Once again with the same friend, that when we visited a reservoir near my town, there was no reason for him to be there too. So I messaged him. I asked him what he was doing at the reservoir when I got home. He said he was taking pictures. But the reservoir would have been more like a 3-hour round trip for him to drive, and he had never mentioned photography to me before, so I didn't believe him. It happened a 3rd time, and that's when I blocked him. I was with my extended family in a restaurant, yet that time he messaged me his location on Snapchat, which is a thing you can do. He was in the building with us. I had to then come up with an excuse to tell all my extended family, who I haven't seen for months, why we had to leave. I told my mom the truth, and she explained that to them after, and they were understanding. I'd had enough. I didn't even message him again. I blocked him on everything, and I didn't hear from him again. And basically, I hope I never do see him again. This happened to me my freshman year of college. Tinder was new, and everyone at my university was on the app. I joined to see what all the fuss was about. Looking through profiles, I found a few guys that were really interesting, and this one guy in particular caught my eye. Well, let's call him Walter. I swiped right on Walter, and we matched. I was excited and kinda giddy because he was super attractive. He messages me, and I got butterflies in my stomach. We message on the app for maybe an hour. Typical conversation is happening. I asked him what he did for a living. He asked me what my major was. Harmless conversation. After a while, he asked for my number so we could text instead of messaging on the app. I gave it to him. He seemed nice enough. We messaged back and forth for a few days. Lots of flirty conversation, and plans to hang out finally occurred. By the 4th day of conversation, he started calling me babe, which gave me mixed feelings. It was cute, but also a little weird. We didn't really know each other and had never met. I ignored it and continued on with the conversation. He started saying he wanted to be exclusive, and he really wanted to see me in person. He was begging me at this point to come to his apartment to cuddle and watch movies with him and his dog. I told him that our first meet needed to be in public. I would not be going to some stranger's apartment. He said I was overreacting and kept begging. I ignored him for the rest of the night. The next day he apologized and said he understood we needed to meet in public, so we'd made plans that weekend. The weekend came faster than I expected, and it was the day we were supposed to meet. Something just felt off, and I decided to back out. I texted him apologizing, saying my mom wasn't feeling well and needed me to come home to help her with some house chores. This made him annoyed, and he said, "Your mom is a big girl. If she needs you, she can call you. Just come over and you can leave whenever to go help her. I really want to see and kiss you." I told him no, that I would be staying with my mom that weekend, and that was that. I only lived about 30 minutes from home, so I actually did go home to see my mom that day. After what he said about my mom, I started ignoring him, and the text started rolling in. Text after text. "Babe, I'm sorry. Please come over. Babe, I miss you. Are you going to come over?" I planned on replying the next day that I was just busy with my mom. Then he started calling me. I had a total of 45 missed calls within a 2-hour period. He left voicemails saying he was sorry and he just missed me and wanted me to call him back. Similar voicemails continued almost the entire time I was home. My roommate texted me shortly after I finished dinner with my mom and asked if we can go out that night. I agreed and went back to my university dorm. Suddenly, the calls from Walter started to increase again. More texts, voicemails, and he started messaging me again on Tinder, asking why I wasn't replying to him. I wasn't planning on replying until I got a message on Instagram that said, "Why didn't you tell me you were coming back to town tonight?" Getting this message really freaked me out. I replied to him and said, "Sorry, I've been busy with my mom. How did you know I was back in town?" He said, "Well, I checked your Tinder, of course. But Tinder doesn't tell exact locations, but has a within 1 mile message." This really freaked me out, and I messaged him back and said that he was being really creepy. He seriously had to be constantly refreshing my profile to see the distance change. The messages, calls, and voicemails continued. All were him now apologizing for making me feel weird about him, knowing where I was. He was just worried about me. We had been texting for less than a full week. Less than a full week. I told my roommate about it, so we decided to stay in that night. The last straw for me was getting a message saying, "Look, I'm really sorry. I'm outside your dorm with flowers and chocolates. Please forgive me." Oh no. I called campus security and told them about this guy, and they never found anyone waiting outside any of the doors. I'm assuming he was in his car waiting for me to reply. I blocked him on all socials, phone number, deleted Tinder, and I've never been back on since. I have seen him once out and about in the town, but he never recognized me, thankfully. Walter, if you ever read this, I'm glad we never met. Thanks for making me second guess every single guy I find attractive. I was 21, recently became a police officer, and was also recently dumped. So my friends suggested Tinder. As a 21-year-old and new cop, I had the "I'm invincible and I can take on anyone" mentality. I matched with a very good-looking, out-of-my-league female. We chatted, and eventually set up a date to meet. She said she had a great open field to look at stars and hang out, and we could meet up at her house. So the night came. I was excited, and she seemed to be excited when I picked her up. She guided me to the field, and it looked nice. Open space, woods, deer, and other wildlife. In the field, I noticed really dim headlights in the distance. Then, the van started driving towards us and pulled up in front of us, almost close enough to block me from going forward. I told her to stay in the car and I'll go say hi. I grabbed my flashlight I had in the car and walked up. In the front driver's side of the van, there was a decently sized man. I asked him what's going on and if he could back his car up a little bit. He was very polite, and he was the owner of the property and said he didn't mean to scare us. He told me he's been having trouble with poachers on his property and just wanted to make sure we weren't going to be shooting at anything. I assured him we only came out to look at some stars and wildlife. He was perfectly okay with that, told me to have a nice date, and drove away. After that, the girl was texting nonstop. Around an hour later, I saw headlights coming towards us again, this time at a really fast pace. We hopped in the car and I moved it to a more defensive position. The same man came close enough to almost hit my car. She hopped out of the car at that point and ran towards the guy. I immediately knew I was screwed. I got out and gave them commands to back up and get on the ground. Neither of them complied, obviously. He then proceeded to charge me and knock me to the ground. Luckily, I was able to get him on his back and get up. I saw my date grab a metal pipe from the van. She told me they had a gun and to give them my money and truck and I won't get hurt. Of course, with my I'm invincible mentality, I said no. She started to cry and saying they didn't want to hurt me. He then started to go back towards the car. At that point, I told them I was a cop, drew my concealed firearm, and to lay on the ground. After a moment of shock from all of us, they complied. I was able to call 911, tell them my name and badge number. I had two at gunpoint and needed backup immediately. I gave our dispatcher the best directions I could to this field while on the phone. They both fled. Again, stupid new cop, young guy mentality. I chased them. I took off after the man, who ran into the woods around the field. I chased him for maybe 30 seconds and heard 3 loud pops and saw a muzzle flash. My I'm invincible mentality went right out the window. I ran back towards my car and peeled the heck out of there. I went back to the area that I had picked her up in, called dispatch again, and had officers come to that location. Of course, the first officers to pull up was my sergeant and my field training officer. Of course, they were both completely understanding and didn't give me any crap about it at all. The most used words were me being stupid and being a stupid rookie. I hopped in their car and went towards the field. Luckily, the van was still there. I was told to shut my mouth and only come out if they started getting shot at. They cleared the area and started looking in the van. They found meth right on the center console and searched the car. What scared me the most was when my field training officer and sergeant came back to the patrol car, let me out and told me to look in the back of the van. Both of them were pale, looking horrified. I went to the back of the van, where there were several knives, duct tape, lighter fluid, a decent amount of rifle ammunition, handcuffs, and what looked to be dried blood. In the front passenger side, we found an AR-15 style rifle and 2 more handguns. We called for immediate backup and detectives. When they investigated the blood, it turned out it wasn't blood. The plates had been stolen, and the van was reported stolen. I still get crap about the whole encounter, but luckily no one got hurt. I will never use online dating again. Ever. The story is something from my childhood or possibly early teens. Either way, it's a story from way in my past. Also, it's 1:30 in the morning as I write this. Excuse me if anything doesn't make sense or words are written wrong. For a little context, I'm now 22 and this happened when I lived back in my hometown around the ages of 11 to 13. For this story, you should know that where my house was like another normal UK street, except for the fact that there was an alleyway down to a train bridge that led to a dirt track that led down to what we called the Commons, and this was woodland area with a small cafe and a golf course, etc. Now, for the story. The Commons were somewhere myself and my family could go all the time as I grew up. There's something to do to cure boredom, to walk the dogs, etc. And I even used to go down there with my friends as we got older. On this particular occasion, I was taking a walk down to the Commons with a family member as something to do to cure boredom. The Commons are beautiful in the summer, and it is a lovely time to walk down there. It never felt creepy or sinister, well, until this particular day. As myself and my family member have walked the train bridge and are walking down the dirt path towards the woods, we stop at a turnstile that leads to the train tracks, which you would just cross in order to get to the woods. As we reached here, we were greeted with the sight of a middle-aged, out-of-shape man laying on the train tracks. Red flags immediately started firing. This man jumps up and makes his way to talk to us. In conversation with him, he seemed normal. He was positive, polite. I'd even dare say that he was happy-go-lucky. He immediately spoke with my family member, something like the following. The weird guy said, "Good afternoon. What brings you two out on this lovely afternoon?" My family member said, "We're just enjoying a walk through the woods to kill some time." Then the weird guy would say, "Sounds lovely. What a nice idea. Have a nice afternoon." And then he went straight back to laying down, on the tracks. As we passed him to the woodland, my family member paused and went back to have an exchange with him. I couldn't hear what was said, but weird guy changed in a flash. Aggressive, violent. Whatever he said to my family member, it shook him as he just came back pale. He wouldn't tell me what was said, but just said that we should push on and for me not to look back. Anyway, we continue walking, and despite being shaken up by the incident, it slips to the back of my mind. The woodlands we walk has a route that circles all the way back around to that dirt path. That's the one we always took. As we were walking back up, we passed the turnstile, and the weirdo was nowhere to be seen. However, as we walked the dirt path covered in thick foliage, we suddenly heard blood-curdling screams. They were loud, terrifying, and downright bone-chilling. Someone was getting hurt. This person sounded to be female. My family member rushed us back up the path and back to the house ASAP. Fast forward a few years later, and my family member explains that in the confrontation with the weirdo, he inquired as to what he was doing, if he needed help, and that if it was unsafe to help, and his response was basically, "Leave me alone or I'll seriously hurt or kill you." That was enough for my family member to leave him alone. Also, we later found out the screams we had heard were linked to a murder in the woods. My family member couldn't remember if it's linked to the guy we met, but it seemed likely. So, guy in the train tracks, let's never meet again. Update. Well, after extensive internet searching, I cannot find any article on what happened. Then again, where my town is, the local paper did not get online for a while. I have spoken to my family member, and since they have thought about it more, from what he can remember, the murder was all self-contained within one family in their house. No one broke in. It was a freak thing that happened. As for the scream, he has no idea what or where it was. The man, he still sees. He just walks around our town center. He said he looks homeless now, so the entire thing isn't as creepy anyway, but still weird at the time.